You're listening to WPPM LP Philadelphia, 106.5 FM, people-powered media, and of course, you're listening to Ray's Latino Talk podcast. This is your host, Ray Collazo, Ray's Talk Show, and the What's Next radio program at WPPM LP Philadelphia explores politics and the latest news and really our perspective on the world. Thank you so much for joining us. You can catch the What's Next radio program on 106.5 FM as well as phillycam.org/listen if you're outside of the Philadelphia radio listening area. And also nationally and worldwide, you can check us out on the TuneIn app. And of course, Ray's Latino Talk podcast. For the podcast audience, you can hear us anywhere. You can download a podcast, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud. The list goes on and on. On this episode of Ray's Latino Talk podcast, I have a wide-ranging conversation with Jeffrey Vargas from Generationology, discussing with us leadership and team building in 2019. How do you manage people of various generations together in one workplace? We've got baby boomers working with Generation Xers, working with millennials. How do you manage and keep millennials motivated? The Generation Zs are coming at you. How do you get ready for that next generation in the workforce, supporting our colleagues through difficult times, and how understanding Puerto Rican point guards is a big part of leadership, and also understanding that humility is the new sexy in management. And I'll come back later with some of my thoughts, some of the latest news headlines, Trump's antics, stacking 20s, Bernie's in the game, and other news headlines we have to keep in touch with on Ray's Talk. So let's get back to Jeffrey Vargas, and I'll be right back. A dear friend to the show, and I don't know why it's taken so long, but thank God we're blessed to have Jeffrey Vargas back finally on Ray's Talk Show.
Ray, thanks so much for having me. It's been a minute. You know, I think we first met when we were both probably a few pounds lighter and the hair was a different color. But it's been a few minutes to get to you, but I'm humbled by the opportunity to participate and enjoy the conversation together.
No, and it was so special. I was with the last time we saw each other in person was in DC a couple years ago. We just literally ran into each other at a cafe, like a luncheonette. Remember? It was like a food court. Right. And I remember I was with a Latina coworker of mine, good people, Letty Bustillos is who it was. Yeah. We're sitting there, and you would have thought we were a twin separated at birth that finally got to meet. And we were hugging. I mean, people, she was like, wow, you guys really are into each other. You're really good friends. I haven't seen him in 12 years, but Facebook, but when you have that kind of connection. But she wanted to know more about what you're doing. And that's going to be part of this conversation. To give people a background on who Jeffrey Vargas is, Jeffrey is a workforce visionary that believes in living a life of purpose on purpose. He's foremost a family man to his wife and 3 wonderful children, but is also the president and CEO of Generationology, LLC, a talent management and intergenerational leadership development and consulting firm that helps organizations improve employee engagement and increase organizational performance. He's actually working on 2 books, one on management, one on being a father to children and specifically in daughters. And Jeffrey brings a lot to the table. Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining the show. And why don't, before we get into this conversation, remind people where they can find you on social media and learn more about the work you're doing with Generationology. Sure.
So love to have people check us out. Our website is generationology.org. They can get us on Facebook at Generationology, Instagram is at Jeff on Generations, Twitter's Jeff on Generations as well. We welcome interests, thoughts, ideas, and questions. What we're up to at Generationology is really helping organizations figure out how to engage their employees in such a way that their employees are willing to give them discretionary effort. And we do that really by focusing on 2 areas. We're a talent management company first. I mean, we're helping people figure out how do you onboard individuals? How do you provide them with learning and development opportunities that are going to help them grow? How do you also give people a chance to what I call fail forward, right? Where they can gain experiences and they can become better at what they do. In addition to that, we also are focused on what we call intergenerational leadership development. And it's a lot, but what we believe is that in today's world, when you have, it's crazy, but you've got literally 4 and very soon to be 5 generations all working in the workplace at the same time, people need to figure out how do they do this thing called collaboration? How do they figure out ways to encourage one another? How do they figure out ways to make them the best that they can be? And I think it begins first interpersonally, by having a vision as to what is success and how can you be successful in an organization. And there are different intergenerational approaches. And so we help executives figure out how they can work across generations. And what we're seeing in our company as well is we're helping not just seasoned executives, but those who are new. Everybody talks about you want to be disruptive and you want to be cutting edge, and that's wonderful. The challenge is that, you're going to have to, in order to be successful, probably encourage and find a diverse workforce. And the age diversity is an area of interest. It helps to identify and, maintain sustainability. So we're really focused on every area of talent management, making sure that outreach and recruitment's right, strategic planning is right, oversight of the learning function is right. And then on the intergenerational side of the house, man, that we're identifying the right people, training them the right way, giving them the right experiences, and then unleashing their leadership potential so they can be who they're supposed to be, not just in the company and not just as a worker, but really holistically as a person. Because we've got a very simple concept, but I think it's powerful, that there's greatness in everybody. And so if we give folks the tools, they can chisel that out themselves, or we can help them chisel it going forward.
Wow. One of the powerful things you just said, Jeffrey, there's greatness in everybody. And I think Jay-Z said something to the effect of, I'm who I am, iconic hip hop mogul, because I tapped into my greatness, but everyone has a gift that they can spread across the world that would have a similar impact. The key is for you to believe it, but also, sort of identify it and cultivate it. We thought it was very timely because Jeffrey Vargas is a big base of his career was being a federal employee, and not only a federal employee, but at one point, the only federal chief learning officer in the U.S. government who was Latino, and along with a handful of African Americans. So Jeffrey kind of came to mind specifically over the last weeks because of him being one of the most prominent folks that I know that in terms of federal work experience on the civil service side, but also his outreach on Facebook and through social media to people that were impacted by the shutdown. So in this first segment, just wanted to begin, Jeffrey, with this because you're providing support to people now that the shutdown's over, and you feel why do you feel it's important to continue to support federal workers? Remember, there was 800,000 full-time employees, another million or so contractors, including approximately 60,000 Latinos, and certainly probably over 600,000 African Americans. So a very diverse pool. But why do you think specifically after the shutdown, it's so important to continue to support our federal workforce?
It's a great question. I think there's a number of reasons why we need to be supportive of federal workers. One of the things that has come to pass is that federal employees over probably the last decade have, really seen an erosion in terms of how they've been appreciated, not just in the media per se, but in the general public as well. If you look at any of the studies done by Pew and others, you'll see almost like a stock with a real negative decline in terms of the percentage of folks who actually trust the government. And that should give all of us a moment of pause, because at the end of the day, who are federal employees? The media often paints a narrative, but that narrative is missing a piece, which is the actual conversation with federal employees. Listen, they're your neighbors. They're the people you go to church with. They're the folks that you play softball against. I mean, federal employees are a part and parcel part of every part of the American fabric. And they're the ones you are next to you in the grocery store. They're the ones getting a haircut. They have thoughts, ideas, and opinions about what we should do as a country and where we should go. But what they all have agreed to is that they will be a part of the American fabric by taking an oath. And that oath means that they're going to, without question, be focused on being successful in whatever it is that they've done. And so for me, I spent 22 years as a federal employee. I started in the federal government in my 20s, and I didn't know much about the world, and I didn't know much about the government itself. But what I learned was there is a cadre of honest, dedicated folks with an incredible high level of integrity who simply want to serve, who made a decision to serve. And so, at this time, I thought it was important that we support folks who had experienced transition, one that they themselves didn't cause. So, I own a small business focused on leadership development. And so I thought, what could I do and what could I give? And so I created a 4-part leadership discussion series to invite feds and friends of feds and those who know feds to think about how they could, sort of work themselves through a transition. And so we did a 4-part leadership series. The first one was focused on self-care, taking care of the mind, body, and soul. Second was really talking about how do we set and identify and achieve both personal and professional goals. How do we surround ourselves with the right people, get into the right mindset in order to go forward? The third, we looked at joy, peace, and fulfillment. Because look, at the end of the day, wherever you work and whomever you work with, the more joyful, the more fulfilled, and the greater connection to peace you have, the better worker you'll be. And then we finished our last fourth session talking about confidence. How do you really identify confidence? How do you gain your confidence? How do you grow confidence going forward? So at this time, I thought, look, it's important to let feds know that they matter. It's important to let the rest of the country know that our feds matter. And it's important for us to have supported one another going forward, because the frank reality is, right, we need great people in our government to move us forward in career positions. This is totally irrespective of one side of the bird or the other, the right or the left. This is the centerpiece of the bird, man. This is what really flies. And so career federal employees, we need them, and we need them desperately. And we need to, identify ways to recruit, hire, and retain fantastic talent.
Yeah, people don't realize that, federal employees for the most part are some of the most, in some sense, non-political people, because they go into the work regardless of their political affiliations, really, to provide service to the country in various forms. I don't know if you know, Jeff, but my wife was impacted by the shutdown. She's a federal employee, and she went into the work she does. I have to have her on the show one day. She's a little shy with these things, but she went into the work because of losing a friend as a teenager, a female friend as a teenager, one of her girlfriends to gun violence. And so, that's the kind of people that, continue legacies and are really doing this work because they go into it to serve. What was the lesson that you learned supporting these federal employees during this period? There was a lot of anxiety, a lot of confusion, and I'm sure you got a lot of feedback from folks that were reaching out to you, and you were providing consultation to during this process.
Well, it's interesting you asked that, because, one thing I'm not is a therapist, but good gracious, when you spend 22 years in the federal government, and, humbly, I would let you know, I've mentored hundreds and hundreds of people. So you have a larger network than you anticipate, I think, sometimes, especially when things like this pop up. And I'll tell you, one thing that I noticed was that trust was just being broken. Trust between the workers and, even in their own minds, what they had as a social contract between themselves and the government. And that, a lot of people don't know, but one of the things that you're required to do as a federal employee is adhere to a number of requirements under a variety of statutes with respect to ethics. Now, those ethical statutes are much, much different than what you'd see in the private sector. Let me give you one example. You cannot accept a gift that's over $50. If you and I go to lunch together, you're not picking up my tab, right? If we have some sort of relationship in terms of, or we're working on a project together, there are 2 sets of financial disclosures you have to complete, depending on your level in the government. One is called a Form 450, the other one is a Form 278. And basically, you've got to spell out your entire financial life. And so you welcome a level of individual transparency that you don't normally have in other venues. And the other side of the coin is that there's some level of job security, that the government recognizes your talents and your needs, and you'll be in a variety of jobs, but you'll be under one umbrella called the Fed family. But that trust bargain was frankly broken during the shutdown, and even up until today. And I would suspect up until probably early next year, we're going to see agencies having to focus on addressing this trust breakdown. Because at the end of the day, individuals and organizations operate the same way, and that's on a platform of trust. One of the areas of focus we have, man, is how do you build? We have actually a workshop called "How do you become a trusted intergenerational leader?" And so I think what we saw, man, was the breakdown of trust, and workers are feeling like pawns, man. Ray, they're feeling like pawns. But I think there is some hope and optimism in the sense that agencies can stop and say, I wrote a little piece. They want to be able to stop, look and listen and meet people where they are and really listen to them, because people are going through some emotional turmoil. I don't know about you, my man, but in my life, if I've ever felt unwanted, I'm not doing too good, right? So I think this workforce has experienced that, but going forward, if agencies focus on changing the value proposition to how can we help you learn and grow, and how can we work closer together so that we're prepared to go through times of turmoil and struggle, I think the workforce has the capacity and the potential to end up stronger from this.
And you're listening to Jeffrey Vargas, the president and CEO of Generationology, breaking down some key factors and observations that he's garnered from his time supporting and pre, during, and post the government shutdown federal employees. Quickly, Jeffrey, before we take our first break, what's your final message? If there's any federal employees or like people like myself, the family, loved ones, and people that are supporting federal employees that are kind of going through this post shutdown and maybe preparing for another one, who knows, about how we can support federal employees during this, or they can do some self-care themselves during this awkward period.
I would say challenge yourself and then take action to take 15 seconds. That's all we're asking for, 15 seconds to text, send an email, make a call, or visit someone who's a federal employee and offer them these words. Thank you for the service that you're providing the country. Thank you for the service that you do every day. Let me know if there's anything that you need, and understand that you are supported by friends and family and a country that needs you.
When we come back with Jeffrey Vargas, we're going to get into a little bit of another area of expertise in Jeffrey Vargas's incredible career, intergenerational leadership development. You're listening to What's Next radio program on WPPM LP Philadelphia, 106.5 FM, and of course, Ray's Latino Talk podcast. We'll be right back. As you know by now, President Donald Trump announced a national emergency on the southern border, and depending on how the court challenge to that declaration goes, he's looking to deviate funds from various pots of the military construction budget to construct border wall along our southern border, particularly in Texas. And, I usually have a lot to say about things, and at a point, I do get speechless with the continued demonization of the Latino community as basically the only thing that this White House is discussing. While we have real emergencies and crises in this country, the ongoing mass shootings, opioid epidemic, climate change. Hell, I would argue that the Department of Homeland Security is more of a danger to those 14,000 children that are being held, many of which in questionable conditions, than migrants coming from the Northern Triangle are to our country. And so I think we have to balance, continuing to challenge what's being normalized, this normalization of demeaning and creating this divide and this false narrative that Latinos are some way not part of this country, not part of its history, not part of its present, and a big part of its future. And at the same time, as I'm discussing with Jeffrey Vargas, taking care of each other, understanding nothing changed about us. We didn't become more hateful. We didn't become lazier. We didn't become less ethical. We didn't become immoral. And there's nothing that a fluky presidential win can change about who we are fundamentally. Take care of each other, continue to challenge people in this atmosphere of hatred that are trying to dehumanize us, especially those children that I just can't even fathom, get my arms around the conditions and the fears and what those young people are going through right now. Don't forget them, but take care of yourself. Take care of your loved ones. Understand nothing changed about us. We are still who we are, and celebrate that and take care of yourself. But at no point allow anyone, including this president, make us feel less about ourselves, challenge our humanity, and challenge our place in this country. Let's hear back from Jeffrey Vargas on Generationology. Welcome back to Ray's Talk Show. This is your host, Ray Collazo. You know, if you're a podcast listener or new to the experience because of you're listening to us on WPPMLP Philadelphia 106.5 FM, you say, man, how can I support this guy? This guy's got a lot to say. He's got some amazing friends. He's got all these friends around the country and in Philadelphia, and they have these cool conversations. And, you know, for a Puerto Rican, he sounds real good. And this guy's got a little swag. He's an interesting character. But we really want to support the movement here. And most importantly, support and elevate the platform of voices like our very special guest today, Jeffrey Vargas. You can, support the podcast, share it with your friends, reviews on iTunes and these other platforms, Stitcher, SoundCloud, TuneIn. I know there's people that listen to it on Podbean. There's so many distribution points. It doesn't matter where you're listening to it. Please rank and review us on those platforms. It really helps spread the word about the experience and to continue the conversations when you're not listening to the show. On social media, on Twitter, @Ray's Podcast, RAYS Podcast, on Instagram, Ray's Latino Talk, and on email, podcastrays@gmail.com. That's podcastrays@gmail.com. And on today's really uplifting conversation here, Generationology's President CEO, Jeffrey Vargas, has joined us to really talk about how we sort of, whether you're a government employee, a mid-level manager trying to take it to the next level, a recent college graduate, a millennial, career professional, or a professional of any generation, how do you take it to the next level and do it in a way that's that really speaks to just being more of who you are, and not changing who you are fundamentally? And of course, we're always welcome to have family and great friends like Jeffrey on the show. Jeffrey, you are Mr. Generationology, so we wanted to get a few thoughts from you about this ongoing discussion happening in the HR world and in the business world around intergenerational leadership. So why don't you share with us just kind of like to just help us, what's the first things we should be thinking about, whether you're a manager or someone who's just trying to make a connection with a coworker of a different generation? What's the first, where do we start this conversation thinking about how to improve our intergenerational leadership skills?
No, it's probably the one thing, the one secret sauce that's not getting put on the burger as much as it should. Look, intergenerational conversations and intergenerational conflict and intergenerational leadership opportunities and growth areas are what organizations are experiencing every day. When I began this generation conversation, probably almost 12, 13 years ago, it was cute. It was interesting. People would raise an eyebrow and then they would go back to their work. But right now, Ray, we have literally in many organizations in the private sector, we have 5 generations. In government, we have 4 generations. But they really are working on the same projects at the same time, expected to come up with the same outcomes. But their approach to life, their approach to work, their approach to things like job satisfaction and completion and opportunities for growth in a company are very, very different. And so to begin the conversation, I often suggest to folks that they stop for a moment and they take a little bit of an inventory from a generational perspective of the folks that are on their staff. If they have traditionalists, say they're over the age of 72 or so, that's one cohort of group. If they have baby boomers between the ages of, say, 57 and 71 or so, that's another cohort group. If they have Gen X, my Gen X folks, 38 to about 50, 52, 53 or so, they have their own perspective. And then you have millennials who are between the ages of, say, 20 and 37. And then you have Gen Z, which is coming up before from basically their late teens, and they're starting to enter the workplace.
By the way, I can't wait till the Gen Zers start calling millennials old. That's going to be a lot of fun.
My man, it's already happened. In fact, here's what the research
the workforce. It's already happening, right? in the neighborhood.
Here we go. You get ready for all kinds. I'm gonna throw all kinds of stats out there, and people, if you're listening and you're driving, you may want to pull over and you may want to say a little prayer up in heaven, because the Gen Zs are coming and we're going to be working for them. But real quick, here's what the research tells us: the average attention span for a Gen Z is 8 seconds. They don't like to just work on 2 devices at the same time. They want to work on 5.
Ay, Dios mío.
Right? They believe they're very pragmatic in their approach to work. Let me give you an idea. Millennials were given an opportunity, and they had a whole lot of hope and optimism. Man, look, millennials were told, you can be anything, do anything. All you got to do is be given an opportunity. And I see, boom, you're just going to make it, right? And many millennials, and this is why you see an incredible entrepreneurial kind of thought process from millennials. What do we need to do? Let's all get us in the boat together and let's start rowing, right? Millennials are fantastic, incredible at casting vision in terms of what should happen next. The challenge becomes in terms of executing against plans that are developed from an intergenerational perspective. I'll get to that in just a second. What I wanted to say about Gen Z was that Gen Z is very pragmatic. They aren't they don't live in the sea of optimism in the same way as their millennial brothers and sisters. They saw their millennial brothers and sisters say, hey, listen, I'm graduating from college. I'm going to be a CEO of my own company. I'm not sure what it's going to be, but I'm going to make, $250,000 within my first 3 years. And then I'm going to start my own foundation. And the Gen Zer said, And then when that didn't happen for them, and they may have come back to a parent's house to live in a basement, the Gen Z said to themselves, hey, wait a minute. Here's why I'm going to school. I'm going to school because I want to get a job. I want it to be more secure. And so there's a huge wave of pragmatism that's coming from the Gen Zs. The baby boomers, which, by the way, our government is completely baby boom. I've written lots on this. I've talked lots on this. We are a baby boom government. And baby boomers' main mantra, Ray, is hope and optimism, right? In 1967, Time Magazine Man of the Year was a baby boom generation. Baby boomers believe in this mantra. There's nothing you can't do. The sky's the limit. Keep reaching for the stars. You're working with a baby boomer when you have an idea, you present it to them, and kaboom, the idea explodes, because anything that's bigger, better, and greater by definition for a baby boomer, it works, right? So you have these generations, and then the one that's forgotten is folks that are moving into many cases senior leadership in the private sector, but they are not found in enough senior leader positions in the government, which is Gen X. And for Gen Xers, baby boomers worked as teams, right? Gen X, you work as a team as one. When a baby boomer sees a big issue, they put together a blue ribbon panel of the world's greatest experts. You see all 125 of them standing on stage with me. When the Gen Xer gets in trouble, they have a team of 2 or 3. So our approach to work is holistically different. Yet we don't talk about it. It's an elephant in the room until we get together and the intergenerational conversation takes place. So,
it's so interesting because we talked about this like in our college years about how we would talk about how from a Latino perspective that, we struggled with clustering ourselves in study groups because we were taught like, get it done, don't complain. And if you had a problem, like it was either so many of us were first generation college students, either you were too embarrassed or you didn't feel like you wanted to bother other people. And then we would see our Asian American brothers and sisters. And, very much culturally, from an academic perspective, they were encouraged to work in groups. And so you see these different sort of cultural dynamics, not just around ethnicity, but around, in this case, generational. One of the things that I hear, Jeffrey, and again, just on this intergenerational conversation, again, this is just to give people a flavor and to stoke the interest and demand for Jeffrey to start his own podcast. And because, but we're certainly going to bring you back. But one of the things I hear a lot from particularly my nonprofit executive directors, senior leaders, but also people that have their own companies and run organizations, is this question related to retaining millennial talent. And so we even see this, and we're going to talk about hoops later in the show. We see this in the NBA, right? Like this generation of NBA superstars, KP just got traded the other day. AD wants to get traded. And this concept of, they seem antsy to kind of move on to something else. And we see that in the job market with millennials kind of bouncing around. So if you're a manager of another generation and you're trying to retain your millennial talent, what's a tip you can provide?
So we're really, really focused on this. In fact, Ray, we got our workshop. It's called How to Build a Workforce of Purpose on Purpose. And one of the things that we focus on in that workshop is we say, listen, you have to embrace differences within generations, understanding sort of what is your dark red line that folks don't cross, but not everything can be that way, right? There has to be more give and take. And one of the areas that we emphasize to folks is on communication. We help organizations figure out, how do you become an organization of praise, acknowledgement, and rewards? And when you start to think organizations, but it hasn't trickled down enough into the mid and into the nonprofit sector. And really what CSR is, corporate social responsibility, it really helps people figure out, what is your organization doing in three areas. One is in the area of philanthropy. At the end of the day, regardless of what your organization does, there should be an area of philanthropy. The other is in the area of environment. People want to know that your organization is doing something to help the environment, and then the last area of CSR is people want to know that your organization is involved in an area of learning and development, and you're connecting with the community. And so, when people start to think about, how do I retain millennial talent, one of the things we say is, bring a group of millennials in, create an interagency work activity or in whatever your company's name is, sort of an intergenerational group of employees, and create what you want to see as your corporate social responsibility profile. And then watch this. This is the crazy part, Ray. Let the people who help create the program, let them run it. And one of the things that you will see is people will stay with the company. They will be recruiters for the company, and they will be advocates for the company because you unleashed their capacity to be successful. So, implementing corporate social responsibility is exactly one of the main requirements for organizations if they want to, recruit, retain, and develop talent for more than a 3 to 5 year period of time.
And I even see this dynamic in the nonprofit NGO sector, because even organizations that their mission statements are service, right? A lot of direct service providers and other similar type of organizations, is that the millennial potential staffer will really call to question that organization's mission, theory of change. They really want to know that it's not just the organization, beyond what's in the mission statement, that the organizational culture hasn't become transactional and sort of, service-based, but not necessarily mission-focused. So these are conversations that are happening. I know people are like scrambling to write down notes because this is the kind of information a lot of people are struggling with and are looking for, particularly from a diverse perspective. Before we go to our next break, Jeffrey, remind people where they can find you on social media, and also if they're looking to potentially connect with you to say, hey, how can Jeffrey come to my seminar, come to our conference, come meet with us at our organization with our leadership, and then we'll take a break here on WPPM LP.
We are available. Our website is www.generationology.org. You can send me an email at jeff@generationology.org. You can find us on Facebook at Generationology, Instagram at Jeff on Generations, or Twitter at Jeff on Generations. And we look forward to...
Oh, Jussie Smollett. ¿Qué pasó, hermano? My goodness. I just don't get it. Well, look, this is the bottom line. Jussie, obviously, the entertainer who's most known for being on the show Empire. It appears by all accounts that he sort of faked that attack for publicity. This is the bottom line. Obviously, Jussie almost certainly made a big mistake. And we're all disappointed. We're all on some level embarrassed for him. And we know that in this current atmosphere, it's the wrong time to make a mistake like that. But the bottom line is Jussie's a obviously immature, confused entertainer, not a political leader. He didn't hurt anybody. He didn't even attack anyone verbally. And so what we have to avoid is this false equivalency that many on the right are going to elevate this issue to. And look, we foment it, right? We share it. We're talking about it. And I think we have to kind of put it in perspective. You know, Roger Stone, who has currently been charged by our federal government, federal officials for repeatedly lying to the federal government about his nefarious interactions with foreign powers and foreign entities who are looking to hurt our country and negatively and hurt our democracy by negatively infecting the elections of 2016. Roger Stone puts an image on social media attacking, clearly threatening the judge. And he's still not in prison. Much less Christopher Hassan, the Coast Guard official, the federal employee who had built up an arsenal was planning to do mass shootings of journalists, progressive activists, and other murders on a massive scale. Let's not put these are false equivalencies. You know, as activists, and I'll talk about Bernie Sanders later in our Stacking 20 segment, we are nitpicking the heck out of these Democratic candidates. There's too many of them. This one's wrong with this one. I don't like this one. I don't feel comfortable with that one. And let me tell you something. We have to keep our eye on the prize. We have to understand that almost all of them would make fine presidents. Put this electoral campaign in perspective. God is not coming from the heavens. Whoever it is, we're going to have to continue to hold accountable. Whoever wins, we're going to have to continue to organize to build the power that our community needs. So let's understand that it is our responsibility to support our candidates, support the party, support the movement, which goes well beyond partisan politics, and understand that the most important thing right now is to build this movement with the goal of having a strong candidate and defeating this menace to our society. Jussie has its place, and it's sad. But let's not lose sight of the bigger picture here. And by the way, when we talk about criminality, why isn't Roger Stone yes, it was ridiculous. Yes, it was stupid. But the felony charges and possibly the jail time this man received, when Roger Stone still has not been put in prison and not been charged for separately threatening a federal judge. Think about that. Let's talk to Jeffrey Vargas some more about leadership, and I'll come back in our Stacking 20 segment on Ray's Talk Show. Welcome back. You're listening to WPPM 106.5 FM, people-powered media. Thank you so much for joining us. And, of course, for our podcast audience, this is Ray's Latino Talk Podcast. This is your host, Ray Collazo. Rank and review us on iTunes, social media. You got to find us. You got to support us. You got to share us, because this is like sofrito for your ears. Listening to this conversation, I know you're scrambling. You're writing notes. You're going to book me about a transcript, because you say, man, your boy Jeff is spitting some knowledge, particularly those out there, whether you're a federal government employee, you're someone maybe that's had some rough patches in the job market. We know a lot of our people in journalism, in particular in media, Jeff. You've seen a lot of layoffs with some of the major media companies, and that's been very jarring, particularly for millennial journos trying to figure out where their space is on various platforms. A lot of our journalists of color have been impacted by that. We've got this. I mean, there's all kind of uncertainty. We have people listening to this that may have been displaced from Hurricane Maria from Puerto Rico. Now they live in any part of random parts of the United States trying to find themselves. Obviously, our immigrant community, there's so many people sort of dealing with this uncertainty. And so I know your comments, Jeffrey, are very soothing to them. And a lot of people can relate to a lot of things that you're touching base on and want to learn more. And again, this is just like an appetizer, just to give you sort of a brief flavor of the kind of work that Jeffrey, the kind of vision, the kind of support that Jeffrey Vargas provides and Generationology provides for their clients. Wanted to shout out the man that brought us together, Jeffrey, many years ago, the legendary Latino civil rights activist, Dr. Juan Andrade, the president and CEO of the U.S. Hispanic Leadership Institute, which is just, a legendary figure. If you don't know who he is, as I tell people, Google him because you don't have former Congressman Luis Gutierrez legacy without that man. You don't have bilingual education in Texas without that man. So just a legendary civil rights and social justice warrior. And Dr. Andrade is still fighting a good fight out in Chi-Town, probably trying to stay warm, Jeffrey. Our homies out in the Midwest are. When you're out in the Rockies like you are and you're like sunbathing compared to their lifestyle, my God. And I wanted to touch base. Another one of your areas of expertise, Jeffrey, is self-confidence. And one of the things that I share with people on this journey is that I had a hard time sleeping for 2 years because I knew there was something I was supposed to be doing. And it wasn't that I didn't know, which ultimately led to starting this podcast and our radio program. But it was, I didn't have the self-confidence to start or the confidence to start. So you actually have, as part of Generationology's footprint, a 7-step program to identify and cultivate people's self-confidence. Again, it's another book, it's another workshop, it's another class. But I just wanted to touch on one or two of them in our conversation. So when we talk about self-confidence, I'm just going to pick one of them, Jeff. We could start with it. When you think about, and this is, I think, very provocative, when you're talking about self-confidence, you think one of the pillars of self-confidence is, quote, cover yourself with a blanket of humility. Share with people how humility is connected to self-confidence.
Yeah, no, we really believe in that the greatest leaders are those that have the capacity to authentically present themselves in an environment of humility. That they really do cover themselves in a blanket of humility. Listen, for us, we preach it, we live it, and we believe in it. That if a person is walking on the face of this earth, they've got something good to share for you. It's a question of whether or not we allow ourselves to be tuned into it. I would say, for me, I didn't grow up thinking I had the world's greatest amount of self-confidence. I was fortunate and blessed to have just a tribe, a number of mentors in my life who spoke into my life, who allowed me to see myself in different ways, and also allowed me to sort of course correct when I thought I was a little higher and mighty than I ever should. They reminded me of who I was. Humility doesn't just disarm the group you're working with. It creates an authentic connection between you and other individuals, because you're letting them know that you've gone through some things, that you use words like, I don't know, I'm not sure, I'd like to get that answer, I'm not the expert on that, and it allows you to pivot also from who you are as an individual, as a leader, and then put the light where it belongs, which are for the people who are working alongside you. Humility always says, I don't want to take your seat at the table. I want you to sit next to me, and then I want to get up and push your seat in. Humility really gives you a chance to give people a chance to unleash who they are, because when you make a connection with someone under the sort of an umbrella of humility, no one's getting rained on, right? You and that other person, the two of you together, the three of you, the cadre of individuals are able to be more successful as a cohesive unit than you ever could have been by yourself. If we think about our greatest leaders, they had a not just a drop of humility. Their whole conversations were seasoned with humility. And we believe that It's something that everybody can learn and experience more of. I think, it's something that we're also born with, right? I think it's maybe an interesting part to share, but I grew up poor. My father was in my life. I lived with him only till I was about 6. My mom took my brother and I and moved us across country from New Jersey. We moved from New Jersey to San Francisco, California, and I was raised in San Francisco, California. There wasn't a lot of Puerto Ricans in San Francisco at the time.
Bay Area.
But you grew up and you learned things along the way. You developed a level of self-confidence, and you also developed the capacity to check yourself. You got to believe in yourself, and you got to check yourself both.
Stack another 20 for the newest announced presidential candidate, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Bernie's back. Back again. Guess who's back? Tell a friend. We're stacking 20s. Every presidential candidate that announces formally, we will, it creates a $20 donation to the Love Shouldn't Hurt movement, Cristina Vega's campaign to support the survivors of domestic violence. But let's get back to Bernie Sanders. As I've been saying, why wouldn't Bernie run? I've often been amazed, that this pushback, and I understand to some degree. Some people believe Bernie's good guy, nice guy, but the wrong time for him. His time has passed. Others are just turned off by him because either he's old, or they don't want an old white male, or they believe Elizabeth Warren's going to take that's her sort of lane this time. They were turned off by the Bernie Bros in 2016. They were turned off by the reports of how some women were treated in his campaign the last time. They just want a diverse candidate. There's just a lot of that residue going on in activist conversations, which is fine, legitimate. But I never saw a scenario where Bernie wouldn't run and shouldn't run. First of all, he's got a base, as you saw by the $6 million that he raised by thousands of supporters on that first day. And of course, the number of donors that you have is very important because you can always go back. You have a bigger pool of people to hit up for more throughout the campaign. He also has an organization. He's done this before. He has leadership. He has activists that are supportive of him throughout the country. And by the way, from a movement perspective, he's been living the lyrics the last 4 years after losing. And we can debate whether or not he wasn't strong enough in his support for Hillary Clinton. That's certainly legitimate. But post that election, he's done what he said he was going to do, which was, it's not just about me. Supported other progressive candidates, inspired the AOCs and other progressive stalwarts to throw their hat in the ring. And you're seeing the fruits of that by the growing number of progressive, visible leaders in this party and in this country. And I love Joe Biden, but Joe Biden's always talking about, we need to engage the disaffected white working class person in the Midwest in our party. My question to Joe, and like I said, I'm saying this with love, what are you doing to build that movement? Are you engaging that? Are you, since you're the vessel for that part of our community, are you out there recruiting candidates, supporting them, strengthening labor organizing in that part of the country? I see Bernie doing things. Now, look, I'm not saying I'm with Bernie. I'm just giving you my political punditry perspective. And my analysis is that Bernie's got a very high floor. The only question is his ceiling high enough? There's no question in my mind Bernie will be one of the last 3 candidates standing. He's got the base. He's worked on, he certainly will have the money. He's worked on diversifying his leadership team. Let me give you a name. This Latina is going to be one of the biggest names, campaign stars that's going to come out of this cycle. And Lilia Mejia, Sean King, shouted her out on Twitter yesterday. You heard Ana Lilia Mejia on Raise Latino Talk podcast 2 months ago. Former head of the New Jersey Working Families Organization, just won a tremendous state victory with the state of New Jersey signing into law 15-hour minimum wage. That's going to lift 1 million people, workers in the state of New Jersey, out of poverty. 1 million people in New Jersey just got a raise because of Ana Lilia Mejia's leadership and the organizing her and her team's been doing in New Jersey over the last several years. That woman's a star. That woman's the political director for Bernie Sanders. Bernie got something. Let's see how the rest of the field reacts, and we will see how Bernie goes. Let's get back to the conversation with Jeffrey Vargas. Now, let me tell you something, Jeffrey, and I agree with everything you said, but I'm thinking about someone that may be listening to this, and it's crossing my mind too, because I totally believe what you're saying about humility, but at the same time, one of the things that is and you talk about the intersectionality of these conversations. So it's a Latino culture. I think a lot of Mexican Americans would also relate to this concept in particular, but in Puerto Rican culture, there's this concept of ser humilde, and there's a phrase "ay bendito," kind of this very empathetic, humble kind of perspective on life. Very much comes from our rural roots, actually, from that part of the island. And and oftentimes we talk about how that actually at times has hurt us in terms of not being aggressive enough or confident enough to move forward and taking leadership positions, be more entrepreneurial. We juxtapose that with, kind of the stereotype of Cuban and Cuban Americans as, being very self-confident and, some would say at times arrogant or very sort of, having a high sense of self that they can do things and accomplish things and be successful. And so how do you so someone that says, well, I grew up humble, but I don't feel like I'm moving ahead. Despite this humility that you say that I have, which I believe I have, but I feel like that's a hindrance at times. How would you address people that feel that tug and pull with the concept of humility?
No, it's a fantastic question. Fantastic.
That's why you're on Ray's talk show, dog. I mean, that's, you know what I mean? Like, this is a basic cable.
I mean, if I had a little gong, I'd be like, gong, gong, gong. Man,
this isn't like the Elvis Duran show. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're breaking it down.
I mean, you're down right now. Let me say this. We have to be able to distinguish between arrogance, confidence, and humility. And listen, arrogance is a cancer, right? Arrogance is what eats you from the inside out, and you don't even know that you're no longer whole. Arrogance does not have a long play. Confidence does. And confidence comes from having exposure and experience. So the fact that you have had some exposure and experience should create an environment where you can speak confidently of the successes that you've had in your life. That said, you always allow people to be just as good, even better than you are. So you can allow confidence and humility to live in the same house, to play in the same playground. What humility does is it creates a level of authenticity that is actually in an intergenerational space, it's required going forward. I recently went to an event. There was a university president there, and they were trying to raise, as you would imagine, raise a couple of dollars. And the guy that was in charge of their endowment, he had a humor perspective where he would, poke a little fun at people, the kind of people who do that. And by the time the program was over, I was sitting with a group of millennials. They were checked out. They were on their phones. The guy's approach had no humility in it whatsoever. It had a little bit of, I've been at this thing for 34 years, had a little bit of a flavor of arrogance, and it washed over any confidence he had. So I believe that we are uniquely positioned as Latinos to recognize from a cultural perspective the benefits of humility, but then take it to the next level to say, I got exposure, I got experience. My goodness, I will act and I will work in an environment of confidence.
Man, my man, Jeffrey Vargas breaking it down, the CEO of Generationology. And before we go to break, and after the break, we're going to talk some hoops, which is a great passion of me and Jeffrey's as well. I do want to say on this point, Jeffrey, I've been so blessed because of being in Philadelphia, my family background, and just circumstance and sort of just being certain places. So I've interacted with a lot of, celebrated figures, hip hop artists, salseros, athletes, and the lesson that those people who still tour the world, who had long careers, like you talked about the long game, they always taught me was you thank every stagehand on stage, you thank every concessionaire, you thank every security guard, you sign every autograph, you acknowledge every positive comment in social media, you're grateful, you humble about your place in this, because if it's not for fans, if it's not for the people that are supporting you, you don't have anything. And so, and you've been listening to Jeffrey Vargas of Generationology. And when we get back, Jeffrey, we're going to talk a little hoops. Is that okay with you?
Oh, let's do that. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The B-ball. You listen to Jeffrey Vargas and Ray Collazo on Ray's Latino Talk podcast, and we'll be right back.
Quick update on Puerto Rico. Late last week, the U.S. Appeals Court ruled on that members of Puerto Rico's federally created oversight board were unconstitutionally appointed. Even though their bankruptcy cases will still be legitimate, the court has mandated that President Trump reconstitute the board and get Senate confirmation within the next 90 days. It's critically important that you call your senators, particularly in communities with significant Puerto Rican populations, the Florida senators, the New York senators, the Pennsylvania senators, Illinois, Connecticut, New Jersey, and have them get engaged in this issue, demand that there be the Senate have an active role in this process of confirming the reconstitution of these judges. There being a process that's transparent, because we know President Trump, him appointing board members for this board is not going to be in our best interest. And we need to hold him accountable and this board accountable. This board's a mess. We don't believe in this board. We now essentially have this junta that manages the day-to-day affairs of the island of Puerto Rico. And it puts us in even a deeper colonial state. But nevertheless, we need transparency. We need our senators to provide real oversight during this very short window of time. Call your senators to get engaged in the reconstitution of the PROMESA board. And let's finish the conversation. Speaking of Puerto Ricans, we're going to talk about the Dow of Puerto Rican point guards with Jeffrey Vargas.
Welcome back to WPPM LP Philadelphia, 106.5 FM on your radio dial or people-powered media. Thank you so much for joining us. This is your host, Ray Collazo, on the What's Next radio show and Ray's Latino Talk podcast. And I've got some names for you, and we're talking to Jeffrey Vargas of Generationology. Jeffrey, before we get in the last segment of the show, remind people they can find you on social media.
Yeah, we are available. My website is www.generationology.org. You can find us on Facebook at Generationology, on Instagram at Jeff on Generations, and Twitter at Jeff on Generations.
I'm going to throw out some names to you, and we're going to, for those that are true Latino ballers. If you don't know these names, you need to Google them, understand your history. The name Pachín Vicens, FIBA MVP 1959, Olympian NCAA champion Butch Lee, NCAA two-time NBA champion Shabazz Napier, the man that almost single-handedly brought down the dream team in the Olympics, Carlos Arroyo, a man that played a critical role in an NBA championship, J.J. Barea, Jeffrey Vargas. All these men have in common is that they're Puerto Rican point guards. And all of them established quite a niche, even though none of them didn't look like basketball players, certainly, by their height or their stature, but carved out incredible careers by learning this very specific skill in basketball, being the point guard, being able to distribute the ball, bring the team together, have the team working in coordination. So regardless of their size. So Jeffrey, I wanted to ask you, for a guy that, quite honestly doesn't look like a baller. You're someone that has is such a passionate basketball fan, but also basketball player. Your kids play. You played high school on a fairly high level for, all things considered. So where did this love for basketball begin for you, and how is it connected to your career work to this day?
Let me say this. I love basketball. I just don't like it. In fact, one of the nicknames I had was called Six.
You're a baller.
I mean, they would say, Jeff, they would call me 6'8", and the reason why was because, and by the way, for those folks who don't know me, I'm a tall 5'5", and maybe about 175 pounds when I'm pushing it. And so
you could post up Muggsy Bogues, but I mean, beyond that,
Muggsy was one of my heroes, man. Playing with David Wingate and the crew, back in the day, coming out of Dunbar High School in Baltimore. Look, the reality is I love the game because it gave me an opportunity to do two things that were high on my list. One, I was, obviously I wasn't tall, but I could run really fast. And especially if somebody was chasing me, which is a good position to have if you're a lover of the point guard position. And the other thing was, I loved the camaraderie, man. I loved being around other guys who were part of the same focus and the same mission. If you and I ever meet in person and you take a close look at me, you'll notice that both of my pinkies, the one on my right hand and the one on my left hand, both pinkies are broken. They are permanently curved a little bit because when I was, I would say, so into this, I was playing all the time. I played even when I didn't have any medical insurance. And I remember over a 1 month period of time, you're guarding these guys and you make a steal from them or you block a shot. It's embarrassing to their ego. So they grab your hand while you're running in the lane and they give you a little twist. Well, that happened to me twice. And both of my pinkies got broken. So, if you notice when we shake hands, my pinkies will never be straight. So I wear it kind of like a scar as a badge of honor, having balled up real. But the camaraderie, the love for one another, the ability to improve oneself individually, I think all of those things make basketball, particularly for Latino young guys who are trying to figure out what to do, man. It gives them a chance to explode their leadership capacity and their ability to work on a team, which, by the way, is going to play out in the work world once they get out of school.
Wow, there's so many lessons there because you're absolutely right. Because and I know there's a point guard camp on the island stuff, but it has really been fascinating how Puerto Ricans, who again are not the tallest people in the world. We've had a few big men in hoops over the years, but generally speaking, we're not the tallest folks, and have sort of carved out this interesting niche, playing this position again. Numerous prospects, college players that have played in the NBA and all over the world, who have found this niche to be able to not only enjoy the game played on a high level, but be able to utilize their skills, even though that may not be an obvious at first glance, but their skills of speed, understanding the game, bringing people together, is really worth kind of exploring more in these conversations, Jeff, in the future. But I wanted to ask you, you're based out in Colorado now, and we could have a whole other show just talking about the NBA and what you're seeing out there. But I think about the Denver Nuggets. The Denver Nuggets, for folks that don't know, are, generally always kind of like usually a team sort of in the middle of the pack. They've had some moments, and people remember Alex English and those guys in the old days, and Carmelo and Chauncey had a run about 15 years ago. But generally speaking, kind of a middle of the pack team. They're one of the top teams in the NBA now, without one of the glamorous superstar players. They have this really intriguing Eastern European guy, looks like Frankenstein, Nikolai Jokic, the Joker, that is basically like a point guard center. They're sort of an interesting roster, but really out of a team concept, they're one of the top NBA teams record wise. So I'm curious, Jeff, if you have any thoughts about watching them day to day. What lessons have you learned about this team camaraderie that they developed that makes them one of the NBA powers very unexpectedly this year?
Yeah, I mean they're incredible. We went to see them play the Celtics actually, and it was the first time my middle guy Diego, my 10-year-old, who's the ball player in the family, got a chance to go to an NBA arena. And so, it's always good. Obviously I watch them often on TV, but you got to go, you got to live it and breathe it in the stadium. Right. And so here's 3 insights that I think the Nuggets are teaching all of us. One is they're allowing their players to actually develop themselves in new areas. And so you're seeing them push their capacity to their what you would call their shooting range. Most people call it shooting range a little bit further out. And so that's why you see a guy like the Joker, who is, all of 7 feet, pulling up from 3-point land, nailing it. And then on the next transition, he's bringing the ball down like a point guard, and he's setting up a nice give and go. And next thing you know is he's rolling to the hole. And so you say to yourself, how can one guy do this? Well, the team concept is, hey, we're going to use your skill sets wherever you are. They also do a great job of switching off on players, and they're saying, listen, sometimes you're going to have to guard the guy that's bigger, stronger, and faster, but the requirement is, if you're going to be a Nugget, that, what's most important isn't your individual stat, it's the team stat. And Murray, who's a guard for them, is no joke. I mean, I saw him go head to head against Steph Curry and Kyrie. He didn't hit it. He didn't just hold his own. I mean, he hit 49 or 50 on Kyrie, and he still had more juice in him. So I think that it's interesting in our previous conversation about humility, but that team, you don't ever hear about them boasting about themselves. We're the greatest team. We've got the NBA playoffs in a lock. They also have Isaiah Thomas that's going to be coming off the bench once he gets healed up. So they continue to be locked and loaded for great success, but they do it in a way where they're going to go out and they're going to work together as a team. It's the team concept that's going to win, and you'll never hear about them promoting just one individual stat, but they're promoting the capacity to be successful as a team and utilize a multiplicity of skill sets that they have.
Wow, so many lessons for the Denver Nuggets. Really quickly, Jeffrey, what are you most excited about for the rest of the NBA season?
What I want to see is the continued growth of Giannis. My prediction is he'll be the MVP. The way that guy can turn a game around, and frankly, I think that the NBA in the next 2 to 3 years will be his. Not just because I love you, man. I got to say that I'm also impressed with your Sixers. I think Ben Simmons is the prototype of what every single franchise wants as a guard. And Joel Embiid.
Ben looked good last night, didn't he? Against the Golden State Warriors? God, he looked good.
Great, man. He's a beast. And Joel Embiid, man,
mouth-watering.
The combination of those two guys, the more and more they get on the same page together, I mean, you're talking about a near big and a big that can change can change where the NBA goes. So I don't see the Warriors, being too much on the top of the hill for too long when you got teams like the Bucks and the Sixers on their heels at some point.
The Eastern Conference is coming back, no question about it. Shout out to, I just found this guy on social media a few months ago, Jeff, and I got to make sure you follow him because he's up your alley. He's a guy named G. Padilla, and G. Padilla is actually Guidel Padilla, who, I don't know if he's Edgar Padilla. Yeah. Remember Edgar Padilla, the Puerto Rican guys that were the point guards on UMass, the guards on that UMass Final Four team with John Calipari? Well, there was a third Puerto Rican guy who was like a bench warmer on that team. So G. Padilla has become like a basketball commentator. And he's sort of like the Puerto Rican Stephen A. Smith. He's very outlandish, real Puerto Rican, knows his stuff, coach, commentator. So he's got a great social media following. He now has a radio show in Orlando, which you can watch online. So Sunday nights I watch him and his two buddies just talk hoops from like a real Puerto Rican vibe perspective. And his whole thing is, and his new thing now, because he likes to say, when he's cocky and arrogant, he likes to say, he's speaking Spanish and he goes, bow to me, because, he knows everything, right? But that now his new thing, because of the increase in violence on the island, his new thing is bow to Jesus. And so he's trying to incorporate with youth that follow him and the basketball fans and that he works with that, we need to tap back into our spirituality. I know spirituality is really important to you, Jeff, so we'll get more into that the next time. Jeff, this has been, this has been the highlight of my week, catching up with a great friend and good brother, Jeffrey Vargas, the CEO of Generationology. Let people know again, any final thoughts for our listeners, and let people know where they can reach out to you if they're want to learn more about your work.
Quick final thought. Listen, at the end of the day, we really are each other's keeper. We are our brother's keeper. We have the responsibility to help people figure out how do they dream big dreams, plan big dreams, and do their dreams as well. At Generationology, we help organizations figure out how to manage and lead across generations, and we really help employees figure out how can they explode their own talent base and unleash all of the capacities that they have in them. People can get to us by visiting our website, www.generationology.org. Send me an email at jeff@generationology.org. Twitter is Jeff on Generations. Instagram, Jeff on Generations, and Facebook is Generationology. So we love to connect with folks and help them meet and find and realize their dreams.